O'Reilly, thanks for watching us tonight. Violence picks up in the Occupy Wall Street protests. That is the subject of this evening's Talking Points memo. As you may know, my pal Glenn Beck believes the Occupy protest movement is just the beginning of a worldwide far-left revolt. Beck bases his assessment on what's happening in Greece, Italy, and other places that are trying to cut back on entitlement spending, and protesters are going wild. With the economy bad pretty much everywhere, there is some sympathy for these kinds of protests around the globe. Talking Points is not quite as agitated as Beck is, but we are watching the situation very closely here in the USA. And there is no question that the violent component of the demonstrations is on the rise. Right now, the occupiers are clustered in about 20 American cities, with New York being the centerpiece. So far, more than 900 protesters have been arrested in this city, and the cost of the demonstrations is approaching $4 million, which of course will be borne by the New York taxpayer. In Oakland, California, things are getting rowdy, according to some reporters on the scene.
The tone out here has changed. We have been threatened. They were telling us if we tried to take our cameras into the plaza and into the camp area, they would take our cameras and break them.
Tonight, constitutional rights were tread on. TV crews were manhandled by occupation protesters. Our cameras nearly slung to the ground following what amounted to an edict by occupation organizers.
We ask that you point your cameras towards City Hall and not towards the tents.
Claiming we weren't asking consent to videotape while in a public space, one protester's dog went after a local reporter. That dog's teeth snagged on his suit coat. It's the only thing that saved his arm.
Talking Points believes there is now danger of people being hurt and killed because some of these protesters are simply out of control. In Cleveland, there's an allegation that one of the protesters raped a woman. And whenever you have thousands of people emotionally charged, anything could happen. America honors protests as part of our tradition, makes the country strong. But as we have been reporting, the Occupy Wall Street demonstrations are not just about economics. You have radical people stirring up trouble. And according to a recent survey, 31% of the New York City protesters believe using violence is okay in order to accomplish their goals. The authorities must continue to be restrained, but they also must have very definite rules. Any law breaking has to be prosecuted, and any threats have to be taken seriously. Factors all over the story because we believe it has the potential to get out of hand. And it does. And that's the memo. Now for the top story tonight, let's go out to the Bay Area for analysis. Joining us, the former mayor of San Francisco, Willie Brown. All right, first of all, you know the turf. I mean, you know KGO and I guess the CBS affiliate out there. I forget the call letters. These aren't anti-protest stations, yet they're getting a hard time by some of these protesters. What say you?
Well, I tell you that over in Oakland, I'm not surprised because there has been some misunderstandings about your right to protest, where you can do it, and what you have in terms of the control of the turf on which you think you can protest. It's just not healthy as it now stands, and the mayor in Oakland is going to have a very difficult time of ultimately controlling it. On the other hand, in San Francisco, it's quite different. The protests were creating problems on the sidewalks in front of the Federal Reserve Building. Some conversations went down with the mayor. They're relocated to another spot for their tent purposes, and I would guess that slowly but surely those tents are not going to develop any tenure. That's what you have to avoid in all of these protests. You protect the right to protest, but you cannot allow them to interfere with the use of space that all of us are entitled to.
What do you make of the survey by a liberal magazine here in New York City that a third of the protesters say violence is all right? What do you make of that?
Well, I think that it does, frankly, a disservice to what is a legitimate opportunity to express your disagreement with the policies that have created huge unemployment and other kinds of social ills. But it is not good to have anybody look with any negative on the protests. You've got to have a positive response. You've got to be like Martin Luther King Jr. was if you want this nation to develop any sympathy, and ultimately join your effort.
That's what two things bother me about this. Number one, I don't think it's an economically based protest anymore. I think it's been hijacked by the radical left. And number two, a lot of these radical people will destroy property and hurt you for whatever reason. Now, what is the difference in your opinion between these protests and the Tea Party protest?
Well, I think that obviously at this moment, the Tea Party protesters have not incurred the wrath of the public officials on the law enforcement side, as has been the case currently in Oakland, where the television cameras have been barred and other kinds of things of that nature. I also know that there appears not to be the kind of response to a survey about violence connected with the protest movement, as you call the Tea Party. But I don't think, however, that the Tea Party is ultimately as potentially universal as is the case with the Occupy Wall Street.
Well, let me challenge you on
identify.
that. Let me challenge you on that.
Yes,
The last election proved that the Tea Party is quite the clout, as they put in to the House of Representatives a number of people that turned the tide against the Democrats in that body. Now, I don't see the protest Wall Street people putting anybody into any office at any time, so therefore I think the Tea Party is much, much more powerful than this.
Be clear, many Democrats in this country that is saying things like, yes, we must protect the right for them to protest, is frankly hoping that it will morph itself into a movement that may assist in Barack Obama's reelection.
How could that be possible if Barack Obama's regime, that's a bad word, if Barack Obama's administration has presided now for 3 years and the economy's gotten worse as it has, how can this possibly help him? It draws attention to the bad economy, and he's part of the problem, is he not?
I don't think he's part of the problem. I think he's trying to fashion, trying to fashion a solution. I think his current jobs proposal is one of trying to fashion a solution.
Okay, but that's a liberal point of view, and you're a Democrat, and you're entitled to it. But just strip away the politics here. You're just a guy, and you've elected a guy to turn the economy around, and he hasn't done it. And you have to say, well, I still agree with him, you do, but he really hasn't done the job yet. So how can these protests highlighting that help him?
I think, Bill, if there is an objective discussion of Barack Obama's performance over the last 3 years plus, I think you'll find that there is a sufficient case to be made for his achievements within the time frame given to him.
Why then do the polls not reflect that?
Well, I think the polls reflect disenchantment with the whole political process.
No, with him. It's a specific question. How do you rate Barack Obama on the economy? And he's in the 30s. Come on, man.
Barack Obama's numbers are better than any of his opponents. Just go back and take a look at it.
No, they're not economically better than Romney's. All right.
But
go ahead,
overall,
Barack
Obama's numbers are better than any one of his opponents, and I think he would welcome Romney as his opponent.
Well, he might have them. Be careful what you wish for. Isn't that the old adage, Mr. Mayor? And I'm not rooting for anybody here. I mean, it could be Kane. It could, if you get into the race and change parties, it could be you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for coming out. It's always good to see you. Next on the rundown.